week 4 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few running backs I would start this week. The first guy is Clyde Edwards-Helaire of the Kansas City Chiefs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it hasn't been that great of a season so far for him, but in week 3 at the Chargers were one of his best games of his career. 17 carries, 100 yards rushing, 2 catches, 9 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown, but a fumble loss in that one. So he's fumbled the football 2 weeks in a row. Darrell Williams, he was worked in on a decent amount of snaps in that ball game in week 3. But with that good game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think he's still in good graces with this Chief team. And in week 4, they got a great matchup at the Philadelphia Eagles, who just got shredded for about 200 yards on the ground versus the Dallas Cowboys between Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. And the Chiefs here, I think they should run the football a little more this season. So far, they're 1-2. I know they signed Josh Gordon to add to their passing game, but I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy that should get more carries and more opportunity here in this Chief offense because he can make plays, and as long as he don't fumble the football, I think he could be decent in this ball game, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him have 15 to 20 fantasy points if he gets the right workload. The next running back is Antonio Gibson of the Washington football team. So Antonio Gibson, so far this season, it hasn't been that great of a season, especially where he got drafted late first, early second round in fantasy drafts. So the first few games for him, week 1 versus the Chargers, 20 carries, 90 yards, 3 catches, 18 yards, and a fumble loss. Week 2 versus the Giants, 13 carries, 69 yards, 2 catches, 4 yards. And week 3 of Buffalo, 1 play pretty much made his fantasy day, a 73-yard receiving touchdown off a screen, and then he also only went for 31 yards. So right now, Antonio Gibson, he's got a good matchup at the Atlanta Falcons. Really can't stop anyone so far this season here. Indoor game in Atlanta. Washington, they're 1-2 in the season. They got to get that running game established more, in my opinion. Also to keep their defense that has been poor off the field. So right here, I think we're going to see a lot of Gibson in this one. And he's a play I would start this week. Last week, I know he only took the screen to the house for the touchdown. But this week at Atlanta, I think we'll see more volume and we'll see more of a consistent ball game out of Gibson. The next running back's Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. So he's been the pickup of the week, no doubt about it, is Chuba Hubbard. CMC, Christian McCaffrey, he's going to be week to week after leaving week 3's ball game at the Houston Texans with a hamstring injury. So Chuba Hubbard in week 3, filling in the middle of that ball game at Houston. 11 carries, 52 rushing yards, 3 catches, 27 yards, and he dropped a touchdown. So he would have had a big fantasy day in PPR leagues with 18 points if he didn't drop that touchdown. And in week 4, he's got a pretty good matchup at the Dallas Cowboys. And this ball game here between the Panthers and the Cowboys, in my opinion, is going to be a shootout where both teams are going to put up stats and points. And it could be similar to the Monday Night Football game that the Cowboys just had versus the Eagles, but I think it'll be way closer of a game that could go either way. So right now, he's the man over there. I don't really see Royce Freeman eating into his workload. Is Chuba Hubbard, and he should be a starter for the next 2 or 3 weeks, in my opinion, till Christian McCaffrey comes back. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him put up Mike Davis type of numbers when he filled in for McCaffrey last season with big games. So Chuba Hubbard is definitely a start this week. The next running back's Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. So last week I said to bench Taylor, and he didn't do much in that ball game. 10 carries, 64 yards, and a catch for 8 yards in that one. So in this week 4 here, I like the matchup in Miami. Miami gives up the second most fantasy points to running backs. And right here, this Indianapolis Colts team, they got to find the winning formula because already now they're 0-3 here in the early going into the season. And Jonathan Taylor, in my opinion, he's got to get more work. So far, only in the first 3 games of the season, he's got 43 carries. So that's not the worst thing in the world, but he should get more of a workload. I know they've been trailing a lot in those ball games, but I want to see him more as a receiver as well, is Jonathan Taylor here. But obviously, they got Nyheim Hines, who has that passing down role. But in this one, I think they're going to run the rock to him 20, 25 times, get the pressure off Carson Wentz, who's been a nightmare so far for this Colt team. And I think this is going to be one of the best games Taylor has all season. And the 5th and final running back I would start this week's Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. So far, Joe Mixon, his rushing yards have been good, but he's not catching the football. He's not scoring touchdowns. But this week, he's got a slam dunk matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars on Thursday Night Football. This Jaguar team giving up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs. And right here in this one, I like a lot of Cincinnati Bengals. I recommended to start Burrow. I recommended to start Jamar Chase. And now I'm recommended to start Joe Mixon here in this one. Because last week I mentioned to bench him. And last week he didn't have the greatest of games as far as fantasy goes. 90 yards rushing, which is great. 18 attempts. And only 1 catch for 4 yards at 10.40 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But this is a guy that's a number 1 running back on a lot of fantasy teams. But right here, I think this week could be one of the better games of the season for him as the season goes on. Versus a weak Jacksonville team. They're at home, Thursday Night Football, and I think Mixon cracks 100 yards and finds the end zone. So that's a few running backs I would start here for week 4 of the fantasy football season.